Here we are into the Serpentarium now, and we're into the classroom part. This is where we exhibit and show reptiles of Okefenoke, and there are 35 different kinds of snakes that live here. Why is that? Because of the nature of the critters that we're looking at. Snakes today, specifically the rat snakes. Rat snakes all have a flat belly. Rat snakes have unique colors, and they're named for kids from kindergarten to graduate school. Red, yellow, gray, green, and black. And every kindergarten kid knows their crayons well enough to identify the snake at a distance. Snakes have had a bad rep since the beginning of time. Yes, they stare, because they can't blink. They have no eyelids. They have no eyelids. Their motion, their locomotion, the serpentine motion, seems to be an offending motion of some kind. I can't understand it. But what he's doing is the same thing we do. When you put one foot in front of the other, you push with the foot you leave in the back. You push, and you take a step. And you push, and you take a step. Snakes do exactly the same thing. They always push with the back of every curve. The back of every curve is a semi-foot, because he's pushing against something. Weeds, grasses, sand, a bush, a tree, whatever. But they have to push to move forward, just like we do. So that's two reasons why they're misinterpreted, and because they have no legs and no arms. And that's unusual, because we're used to seeing critters with extremities, and they just don't have them. They lost them many, many millions of years ago. In the swamp, we have 35 different snakes, and the 5 rat snakes are the ones that are most common here. On the hill, there are 2 places in the swamp. You're either on the hill or in the water. And if you're on the hill, you're on an island, and you'll find the critters that live on the upland, on an island. But they all use the same method of capture. They strike, bite, and hold, and in a single motion, wrap at least once and maybe twice around the body of the critter. And then they contract their muscles. So the animal actually dies of suffocation, not from just being squeezed to death, but from suffocation. He can't breathe. The snake will then open his mouth, get him into position, and begin to swallow the animal by forcing his mouth over the critter, pushing against something to get his mouth in there where he can pull. Once he gets his upper and lower teeth, not fangs, upper and lower teeth, so he can pull like this and pull it into his mouth and force it into his throat. Then through a unique kind of muscle action, they begin the swallowing action. The swallowing recalls a motion called Peristaltic Motion, where muscles contract synchronously in a pattern, work them down to the stomach. A meal of a bird or a fish or a frog may last the snake a week or 2 weeks. And for some snakes, it doesn't matter. They may go for 3 months, 6 months. There's some that can go for a year without eating. But yet, when they get hungry, they eat a lot at one time. On the hill, one of the most common snakes we see are the rat snakes. Because they are terrestrial, they're up on the hill where we would be most of the time in the swamp, hopefully. Now, this is one of the more common kinds that we see here. He is a red rat snake. Elef guttata is his proper name. Notice his flat belly. The flat belly is very important to these snakes. These act as feet. and each one has 4 muscles attached to it. Each one of these little transverse scales, they have 4 muscles. 2 pull it forward and 2 pull it backwards. 2 pull it forward and backward in a synchronous motion all the way down the body. That way he forces the animal into his esophagus and down into his stomach, where it will slowly be digested. Any unusable parts will pass on through. Most of the animal will be digested and absorbed. Any waste material, maybe in some cases there might be bones, in cases there might be feathers or scales of some kind, because big snakes eat little snakes. Big snakes eat little snakes. This little fella is very cold, and he's easy to hold because he likes me. He likes warm. He don't like me. He just likes warm. Snakes do not hypnotize birds. Snakes do not stare at people or any animal. They just simply do not have eyelids and can't blink. But something they do on a regular basis is this. They shed their outer scales. These the scales that you see here are really just like this. The color is in his skin, not in the scale. See how there's no. This is a red rat snake here, but there's no red in it. It's all still in here. Not that this is certainly not the shed of this snake. That happens sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year, sometimes just once a year, depending on how much they eat, the temperature of his environment, and his activities. So now let's talk about their prey. Their prey could be mice, it could be voles, it could be rats, small rats, because a big rat would eat the snake. Rats belong to a group of animals called rodents. And tomorrow I'll show you what a rodent is. How do you identify a rodent? And I can tell you today, all rodents have yellow or orange incisors. Yellow or orange incisors. That makes them real easy to identify, and I'll bring skulls to show you that tomorrow. They said, as I say, 5, 6, 7 times a year, depending upon their diet and the temperature, etc. In the top of his head, right in there, he has an organ, and it's in the hard palate of his mouth. There are 2 slits in the palate of his mouth. When he puts his tongue out, it's wet, moist, and he waves it around in the air, and then he pulls it back. But he's not through yet. Then it goes up into those 2 holes in the roof of his mouth. That is the most sensitive part of his body. That tells him what's out there. That's why he's doing it all the time. He's looking to see who's out there. They're leaving scent trails. And it's called Jacobson's organ, like Al Jacobson's organ. So that's how they identify their prey, and that's how they find their prey. Is they find a track where they're sniffing along the ground, doing this. He's either hunting or he's already on a trail, of a scent trail of an animal, and he'll follow that to its richest area. Then he'll park. He'll park right there, and wait, and wait, and wait. He may have to wait 2 or 3 days, but he has the patience of Job, and he can wait. And when he does, the animal may come back that same pathway again, and that's when he will capture, depending on its size. And you know, and of course, they know what they can and can't swallow. So that's basically how they find their food. They sniff around until they can locate an odor, and they follow that odor to a rich area, and they can tell when it's strong, and then they just wait, because likely that animal will probably come back that way again sometime in the next few days, and he can wait. Shedding, let's put him back in there. Shedding begins at the mouth, right here. Actually, you can tell about 3 days before their eyes turn silver or gray. And most folks misinterpret that as being blind. Not so. It may be a little cloudy, but it's not. They're not blind during shedding or during preparation to shed. And they then he has a sense that knows he has to do this. He'll start rubbing up against twigs, limbs, rocks, pebbles, whatever he can rub against, the bark of a tree that will catch a lip and pull it down, or catch another lip and pull it up, and the shedding begins. The shedding begins. Then his motion then changes entirely. From isolated standing still, it goes through a jerky type motion where he assembles, where he's pulling himself forward and jerks, and it pulls this back. It pulls the shed back and down. And so eventually he can crawl out the other end with a perfectly inverted, by the way, you know, that's the outside in there, because this just out here is the inside of his dress that he had on. And so here we have a perfectly inverted tail. This snake was in excellent health. Rarely do you see it come out this far. Most of them pull off, tear off. But also, you can locate on this a point there called, there's a little opening there called the cloaca. The cloaca. And they, in order to reproduce, they oppose their cloacas. They oppose the cloacas, insert a penis into the cloaca, not into the body of the snake, but into the cloaca. The cloaca is a common opening for reproductive, digestive, and excretory. All three systems take place right there, that same place. So that's the cloacal cavity there. Then the divisions occur internally.